Welcome to Bold Speak. I'm Anthony Creedon. Glad you could be with us as we continue this series, Reclamation, with the first part, Reclamation Church. Now, in our first lesson, we talked a little bit about what it means to be the church and how it is that we define the word church. Very specifically, we said that the word church is best defined as the people, the community, the body of believers that comes together in a common confession of faith in Jesus Christ for the redemption of all things. Now, we also talked about how very specifically to define the word church as an institution or a building comes with some distinct dangers and can make the word church a very loaded term. But the word church isn't the only loaded term in the life of the body of believers. There's another one that I think is sometimes problematic, and that's the word religion. When people think religion, there's a lot of different ideas that come with it. And again, it carries with it some of the same pitfalls as the word church. If we define religion poorly, we're going to end up with a poor execution of religion. So what is religion? I would say for most people, when they think about religion or hear religion, there are some different ideas that are tied to it. And one of the ideas that sometimes gets tied to religion is this idea that it's just a listing of rules or standards that define a very specific organization. Here, the word religion is associated with ideas of controlling or manipulating people. Now, that's a very skewed version of religion, and I think a very poor one that leads to a wrong execution of religion. So we have to define religion, I think, in the right way. That is to say, we have to define religion as God defines religion. So, according to God, what is religion? Let's explore first the word religion. The word religion is made up of two Latin words. The first is a very popular and well-known prefix, re, which means to do again. But the second word, ligio, that's a bit of a different story. Like many ancient words, the word ligio has several different ways that it can be defined, and a lot of that depends on your context. Now, if you do a little bit of research into the Latin word ligio, you're going to find commonly two words that define ligio. Right? The first is to bind. Now here, with the word to bind, we think about restricting in some way, right? And so that is associated with a lot of the ideas of control and manipulation. And so typically, under that definition, religion is seen as a very negative thing. The other possible way to define it that's very common is to connect. And when we think about connecting, we think about kind of connecting with people, connecting with community, and that can be a very positive thing. But I personally find both those terms, to bind and to connect, largely unsatisfying as a definition of ligio. There are other definitions of ligio that I think are more appropriate. The one that I think is actually the most appropriate is this: to devote. That is, to devote yourself to something. Very specifically, it's kind of a combination of binding and connecting, because it's describing a way to tie yourself to something. Now, under that definition, to tie yourself to something can again be both positive or negative, depending on what you're tying yourself to. If you're tying yourself to a community of people that believes it's their task to control and manipulate people, then obviously, yes, that's an incredibly negative thing. But if you're tying yourself to a community of people that desires to love and to care for others, that's a positive. Especially if we talk about tying ourselves to a community that confesses the love, grace, and mercy brought to us by the Son of God, Jesus Christ, to redeem and save the entire world, and that calls us to live that love and mercy out in an expression toward others. Binding yourself or tying yourself to that is a very positive thing. And then to think about repeatedly doing that, repeatedly devoting ourselves and tying ourselves to that God of love and mercy, that's a very good thing. Now, what does all of this mean? Well, what it means in connection to the larger conversation is this: how we define the word religion is going to have a direct impact on how we define the word church, and vice versa. Right? If we talk about a bad church, we're going to get bad religion. If we talk about good church, we're going to get good religion. So how is it that we decipher what it is that we're specifically talking about when we talk about religion? I think the best way to do that is to go to the source. In other words, we have to look at God's word and see what God has to say about what religion is. Now, the Bible is full of expressions of religion. And very specifically, it's full of expressions of religion in the Gospels as Jesus expresses the nature of true religion. There's a very common misconception that Jesus in some way hates religion. He doesn't hate religion. He is, in fact, the essence of religion. What he hates is he hates the ideas associated with a poor definition of religion that is to control people or manipulate people like the Pharisees did. Jesus was trying to teach against the Pharisees' definition of religion, not the true definition of religion. Now, with that being said, there are just a couple of places where we get a very specific definition of religion, and in one place in particular, we use the word religion to very specifically mean something, and that's in the book of James. The book of James, chapter 1, verses 26 and 27, we're going to read through here together. Now, the study is going to focus very specifically on verse 27, as it's the positive to verses 26's negative about what religion is, but we're going to read both. And this is what it says. If anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God, the Father, is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. Now, there is a lot wrapped up in these two verses, but in order to get a clear definition of religion, I think we could probably sum it up this way. Religion is the action of love and the careful guarding of the mind. Okay, religion is the action of love and the careful guarding of the mind. Now, here in this definition, you hear two things. Religion is about a right understanding and a right living out of that understanding. That is to say that religion means you need both. You need a right understanding of who God is and what the gospel is and who Jesus is, and you need a right understanding of how it is that we're supposed to live it out in an execution of living out of that love. And if we go off balance with one of those, we end up in a very poor place in religion. If we end up kind of going too far on the side of a right understanding, then religion becomes all about what we know and how we know it and standing up for the truth, but we don't execute the love of Christ in the way that he has asked us to do. If on the other side of the coin, we weigh too much on the kind of right living out and living out of the gospel and kind of disregard right understanding, we can end up in our execution of the gospel looking very different, or in fact being counterproductive, because we don't rightly understand what it means to be the people of God and what it is to follow Jesus Christ. That is to say, religion is a balance of both right understanding and right doing. Now, this leads us to another place that I think is really important. If religion is about kind of what we're tying ourselves to and how we tie ourselves to Christ, that means that we need to think about what are the communities that we're tied to. Is it important, for instance, to be connected to a congregation? And if so, in what way are we connected to that congregation? I think it's a good opportunity for us to kind of evaluate the community that we belong to. If we associate to a community that weighs too heavy on right understanding, we should probably be a part of helping them to think through and be creative on how to rightly live out that gospel. And on the other side, if we have a group of people that are rightly living out the gospel, but not a lot focused on education or right understanding, we can encourage them to do that and embrace that part of our faith and religion as well. It's about a balance. Religion, right believing and understanding, and right doing. Learn and live the gospel. Now, this also gets to another question of then, as we consider the congregations we're a part of, how it is that we're executing the mission of the church. And that's actually the next lesson that we're going to do. What does it mean to be a part of the mission? And if you have your study guide with you, and if you don't have a study guide, you can make sure to get it on our website, www.boldspeak.com/shop.html. That's our shop page. You can get connected there and purchase our study guide for about $3. And then you can go along with us, take notes, and kind of journal in some places. There's a place down there that's about your thoughts, and I want to get your ideas. And here's the question that's there. what do you consider to be the mission of the Christian church? Okay, in other words, when someone says that we're going about the mission of the church, what do you think of there? Jot down your thoughts. If you want to make some comments in the video down below, you certainly can. If you want to comment in our streams on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, please feel free to do so. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what the mission of the church is. All right, so as always, make sure you follow us on Facebook and all our different social media streams. Make sure that you kind of stay connected with us. Subscribe to our channel so you get alerts on new videos. And please make sure to share this with your friends, your family, your community, as we kind of get this study together and talk about reclaiming some of these very important ideas associated with the church. Again, super glad you could be with us. Until next time, I'm Anthony Creedon, and that is The Bold Speak.